All right, so we're going to be talking about taking the monthly pension or the commuted value of your pension. So if you're an auto worker, this podcast is pretty much specifically for you. We did an ebook recently about whether it was the 8 top tips that you need to know before taking the auto workers buyout. So this is kind of a continuation on that. And I'm going to give it over to Alen, and we're going to do talking about the monthly pension or the commuted value of your pension.
Yeah, so living in Windsor, Ontario, there are a lot of Big Three workers here in our city. There are also some people this may be relevant to as well too. If you're watching this and you're eligible for an OMERS pension, in some cases, if you are age 50 or under, you can actually take the cumulative value. And what that means is basically your company is going to say, okay, at age 60 or whatever your normal retirement age is, we're going to give you X number of dollars. So for example, Chrysler, I have a number of clients that work for Chrysler, probably, I don't even know, 40 or 50 at least. And so with the recent round of buyouts that were offered, some people were eligible for about $3,700 per month. So what happens is if they're under the age of 65, they'll get that amount till age 65. Then it actually decreases at age 65 to coordinate with Canada Pension and Old Age Security.
Oh, wow.
So a lot of people, I think it's going down to about $2,200 or $2,400. Everyone's a little bit different, so don't quote me on that, but these are just very generalized numbers. So that's basically always been the option for years and years. This first round of buyouts that were offered a few weeks ago, this is the first time that Chrysler actually said, well, instead of you taking that $3,700 a month, we're going to give you this bag of cash. We're done with you. And we're off the hook. You need to now take this money and create an income stream for yourself. So there are a lot of different factors, what your age is, what your income was while you were working. So everyone's amounts will vary slightly. But give you a couple examples. I met with one gentleman that had been there for 30 years and he was eligible for, I think it was $380,000 that could go into a locked-in retirement account. So there are some restrictions on that account when it comes out, and we can talk about that. We've got the whiteboard behind us, so I can draw a little picture in a minute about that. And then there's a portion that's cash. The biggest key is it's going to depend on how much RSP contribution room you have. So let's say there's $2,000 that they're going to pay, $200,000 they're going to pay you as cash, but let's say you only have $100,000 of RSP room, then you can roll that into an RSP, defer the tax, but then there's this extra $100,000 that you have to take as cash. So the key will be, at what point during the year are you retiring? So if it's, say, July 1st and you've worked from January till the end of June, and then you've got your vacation pay, perhaps your income might be $45,000 or $50,000 after they've paid out your vacation pay, then you're tacking $100,000 onto there. They do have to withhold 30% tax. The government requires that, but we want to make sure that that's enough money that's come off, or else the next year you're going to have some tax liability.
Yeah.
So this is where the planning and the expertise of working with a financial advisor is huge for a few reasons. I've met with some people that have identified, I've made $100,000 to $130,000 a year working overtime. They're going to go from making a pretty substantial income to $3,700 a month, or having this chunk of money, and maybe they haven't been great with putting money into savings.
That's kind of scary.
They have
a big lump
debt,
sum.
and then they're getting this lump sum, and they have to create an income stream for themselves. Right. So there's pros and cons to taking the monthly pension benefit, and we can talk about that a little bit. Everyone's situation is different. So that's why I recommend to people, if you're looking at either option, that you speak to a professional, specifically somebody that specializes in retirement planning. Like, that's my jam. That's what we like to do here, because we want to figure out, if you've worked at one of the big three for 30 years and you're, 55 years old, and you're looking at either taking the monthly amount or the bag of money, what does that look like? Because if you're 55, you're still 5 years away from getting Canada Pension, and that's a reduced Canada pension amount, or you're 10 years away from full Canada pension, you're 10 years away from old age security, what does that look like?
So you get this one lump big sum and you got to make sure that it lasts. Like if you're retiring
Correct.
at 55, you got 5 years before you can apply for Canada pension, then got to figure out how to make that last.
Exactly. So we take people through a process. So we look and we say, okay, what do you need to run your household now? So we want to look first at what are you taking home now that you're comfortable living on? Is it just you? Is there a spouse that's, that we're factoring in their income as well too? And then we want to look at, do you have a mortgage? What are your property taxes, hydro, gas, your utilities? Basically, how do you just keep a roof over your head? What does that look like first? Do you plan on staying in your house long term? Then we want to look at what other financial obligations do you have? Do you have a vehicle payment still? Most people are probably paying somewhere between $500 and $800 a month on a vehicle. So how much longer do you have left on that vehicle payment? And if you're paying $800 a month and you're only going to be taking home your pension's $3,700, that eats away a big chunk of your monthly benefit. Groceries, you have to eat, right? And then what are all those miscellaneous expenditures that you're going to have? Is Amazon at your house 3 or 4 days a week?
Yes.
Are you going to golf? Do you frequent the beer store or liquor store? No judgment here, but you're going to have more time on your hands where you're not going to work. You might buy an extra case of beer or 2 in a month.
Taking into account all the expenses.
Right. So we want to look at what does it cost you now to run your household when you can take those overtime shifts to, you're going to do a hard stop potentially, or do we need to figure out, are you going to work somewhere part-time? That's what we want to figure out, because we want you to have that same lifestyle in retirement as you did when you were working. Right? What's the point of working, shift work, 12-hour days, all the rigmarole of day-to-day life, working as an employee. Now you're going to have all of this freedom. What are you going to do with your time? You're probably going to spend more money because you're going to have more time freed up. Well, what does that look like? So there, again, are pros and cons to that commuted value of your pension. What happens, so let's use that $3,700 example. So, you've been at Chrysler for 30 years, there's $3,700 a month. If you pass away, then your spouse would get 2/3 of that pension income. Keep in mind though, currently how it works is that pension income does not go up. It does not pace with inflation. So I know I've shared this in previous videos. My father-in-law retired in 2001 from Chrysler. His pension did not go up. He unfortunately passed away in 2023. My mother-in-law gets 2/3 of a pension that has not gone up since 2001.
Yeah.
So that is huge to factor in. Also, when you pass away, there's no old age security. And then knowing what Canada pension is going to pay out, so that factors into the plan as well too. I've had situations where it makes sense for somebody to take the commuted value of a pension because I had the one couple, the wife retired from Chrysler, so we know she's going to have the clear, defined $3,700 a month she's going to receive. He was one that was offered the bag of money. And, with family circumstances, it actually made sense because what happens with the pension plan, the money that comes from, or that you essentially create your own pension plan, put the money into the locked-in retirement account. If this gentleman passed away, the money rolls tax-free to his wife, and any money that she doesn't spend from there, that money can go to their children.
Got it.
So what happens with that $3,700 a month benefit, wife passes away, husband gets 2/3 of the pension and vice versa. But once both spouses have passed away, there's no money left, right? There's no liability. The pension company's done paying. Whereas if you take that commuted value of the pension, then if there's money still left, there is money that you could leave to the next generation.
Okay. So you mentioned you're a retirement specialist. What does that entail?
So the one thing that really, it took me until I was about 18 years in this business to realize that was my favorite thing to do. I had a series of meetings. What's that? There's that one adage where they say like there's two defining points in your life, like when you're born and the reason why, like you figure out why you were born. And to me, it's like I've realized I just derive so much joy from figuring out, hey, you've worked a long time, you've amassed enough money, now you can comfortably say, okay, I'm done working, I want to go travel and enjoy time with my kids or grandkids or take care of my elderly parents.
It's figuring out your purpose in life.
So yes, So I figured out my purpose, and it took until about 18 years to say, wow, this is such a cool feeling. And I have a client, a couple quick stories. And then this is going to be a long answer to your short question.
It's all good.
But I do have a couple that I had met with. They've been acquaintances for a number of years. And they said, we have a financial advisor, but, could you give us a second opinion? Because we just want to be sure we're on the right track. So got copies of their tax returns, got copies of their investment statements, like I would any other prospects coming in, laid it all out. The wife was eligible for a pension plan coming up within a couple of months from work, CPP, OAS, husband, same thing, looked at their investments. Without even factoring in their investments, I figured out that the wife he had made the decision to retire within like a few weeks. She was going to work for 3 or 4 more years. We figured out she was going to work for $44 a month.
Wow.
So when we look at, EI, CPP, union dues, how much is coming off of this woman's check for her pension plan versus had she taken her pension, got the pension credit, CPP, OAS, you get the age credit, there's a number of different deductions, and how I laid it out, this woman just stared at me dumbfounded for like a couple minutes, like, what? And I just said, I know it's a lot to absorb. I just, write down your questions. We'll reconvene. We'll meet again. Long story short, she's now retired because, so this particular lady, though, she has elderly parents. So she said, this is fantastic. I can spend more time with my parents and take care of them. They are in a long-term care home, but at least she can go and spend more time with them. We're friends on Facebook. She lived her best life the last couple of summers with her grandkids because they have a pool. Grandkids were over all the time. Like $44. Costs you more than $44 to drive to work.
Gas.
It costs you more than $44. Yeah. So when you start looking at those things, have another set of clients, they came in and they had dealt with the bank for a number of years. And I said, even if you decide you don't want to work with me, I at least want to show you that I guarantee you're going to work for $200 a month. No way. The body language, show me.
Yeah.
Sure enough, by the end, I was like, okay, Alen, how do we have you manage our money? Because they were, in fact, I've been doing this a long time. This is my jam. That, they were going to work for $200 a month. This couple went on a cruise. I literally got a picture each day in the port and the couple telling me how much they love me because
you showed them they could retire early.
Able to retire. Yeah, there's a little bit of an age gap, so the wife's still working, but just showing and how I laid it out. So to me, working with somebody that's their specialty, right? So there are so many things to know. I learn constantly in this business, and this is my full-time occupation. There's always things to learn. But we use the analogy a lot. If you find out you have an issue with your heart, you could go to your family doctor. They are probably equipped to help you with that issue. However, you probably feel a little more comfortable going to a cardiologist because they just deal with the heart.
They specialize in the heart, yeah.
Right. So with me, I want to look at all of these different factors.
You specialize in retirement.
Yes. And no offense if you're watching this and you're 30 years or under, I spent a lot of years convincing young people that they need to save for their long-term future.
Right.
I did that for a number of years. I have a young lady in my office that is a junior advisor, and she works with younger clients. I'm past the point of motivating younger people to save. If you can't see with what's going on in the world about inflation, the markets, and how the world is changing, hopefully you can, and hopefully you're motivated and you want to save. That's not where I want to spend my time, is motivating young people. I want to work with people that have worked hard, they've saved, they've sacrificed, and now they're at the point where they're saying, okay, now how do we stop working or substantially reduce the amount of time that we're working?
Right.
And then how do we enjoy our money? How do we take our money out and not unnecessarily pay too much tax? How do you do those family trips or create those legacies that you want to create? That's what I want to do. So why I specialize in retirement planning is it gives me so much joy to be able to tell people that you don't have to go to work anymore, right? That's cool.
Really
it's
cool.
A nice feeling.
Yeah.
I mean, but there's also a big liability on my part. I have to the onus is on me to make sure that you're also not going to run out of money.
Yep.
So
that's a huge responsibility.
Huge. And we want to make sure that, and I've had to unfortunately say to some people like, hey, you're taking this money out, but I just want to let you know, you kind of got to slow your roll, because if you keep taking money out of here, you are going to run out of money. And trust me, it's not something that I like to tell people, but my job is to remind people that, hey, we have a financial plan in place. I get life happens. I have circumstances where, clients have called and it's like, I have to help my kids with this. I have to help my kids with that. Sometimes as a grown up, you have to let your parents or your kids kind of
figure things out on their own.
Yeah. It's not necessarily always the best, life lesson. It's kind of like my son. I'll tell him a zillion times, like, stop jumping on the couch. And then one time he falls, like, I told you so. Yeah. It's kind of the same with kids and their finances. You can be there to bail them out over and over again, but if it's going to be detrimental to your finances, then sometimes I have to let people know that. And
then one day you're not there to help bail them out. Then what are they going to do? They got to learn how to stand on their own.
Exactly.
That's what I think.
Yeah, that's my least favorite part of my job, just to let you know, because it's uncomfortable. But I have to remind people, ultimately it's your money and it's your choice. You're going to do what you want, but it's my job to say, like, hey, I get it, but they keep coming back to the well, and if the well's always here, and you can blame me as your financial advisor. I asked my financial advisor, and we don't have any more money we can access at this time. You're going to have to figure it out. Okay.
So tell me about the 5 specific designations that you have for retirement. Mm-hmm. List them off, and what are the benefits?
Okay. So probably the most recognized is CFP, Certified Financial Planner. Mm-hmm. So that is, and it's worldwide. I actually went to a conference last year in Vancouver, and I'm going to one in Miami where there's financial planners all over. So CFP is a very widely recognized. That was definitely a pretty intense exam. You have to be a financial advisor for at least 4 years. A lot of numbers, math, calculations. Thankful that it's done. But it's one of those designations where I think it sets you apart from other financial planners. And then I also had to sign an oath. I have a fiduciary responsibility to do what's in my client's best interest. So that's the first one. I have my Certified Life Underwriter designation. That's another one that's pretty recognized across like the US and Europe and Asia as well too. And that's an advanced tax planning. So if people are wanting to leave money through philanthropic endeavors, that helps me for business owner clients. So a lot of advanced tax planning. That's 2. Third one, elder planning counselor. So that's helping people in the 50 plus demographic. I did that one, I think it was back in like 2012 or 13. I also have my I did elder planning counselor, master financial advisor. So I did that one in 2020 during COVID. During COVID, I actually got 295 continuing education credits because couldn't go anywhere. So might as well learn. And that one is specializing in pensions and benefits. So I did that one just to become even more well-versed in how pension plans work, to be able to help people specifically for retirement. And the last designation is the Certified Executive Advisor. So what that is basically helping. When somebody dies, there's up to 17 different professionals that you may have to interact with. So, you lose a parent and you're having to sell their home, you're dealing with a real estate agent. So
you deal with the executor of the will. That's what this is.
Correct. And but before somebody passes away, making sure they have everything in order.
Right.
So that the family doesn't have to necessarily deal with as many of these professionals. I've had situations where I had a client pass away last year, and one of her sons is my client, and she had sold a home and was renting a condo. And when she passed away, these kids literally had to come in with their pieces of identification and their banking information. The way we had structured mom's investments, all they had to do was sign and receive the money, and I did her final tax return the next year. The hardest thing, which I'm sure is the hardest for everyone, was just cleaning up her condo and, separating, pictures and that sort of thing. Yeah. They got to focus their time and effort on that, not going to umpteen bank appointments, lawyers appointments, accountant appointments, etc. I was able to simplify that for them. That's not the case for everybody, but the more planning we can do in advance to make it easier. I can't tell you the number of people that I have to remind them again and again. I get doing a will and a power of attorney is not fun. There's a million things you'd rather do. But it's necessary so that you're not leaving your family in a lurch when you haven't planned properly.
And you never realize how many professionals you have to deal with until you're in a situation. It's like, my mom died. And then it's like, funeral places, lawyers, insurance,
realtors to
realtors,
sell your house,
all of
an
that.
appraiser to figure out what your house is worth, somebody
Yeah.
to come in. What if somebody's a hoarder and they have a ton of stuff? You have to have somebody come in and maybe do an auction. What does that look like? You know,
Right.
it really can add up to be a fair amount. So
That's why it pays to be prepared. So having a will and estate plan goes a long way.
exactly.
Nice. All right. So can you give us a couple real life examples of people that have taken the monthly pension and an example of two of someone that has taken the commuted value?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've had situations where somebody takes, again, that monthly sum. So what we do is we figure out, what do you need to run your household? And then we look at, so back to the Chrysler $3,700 a month, we want to figure out, what do you take home after tax? So I do a mock tax return to show people, okay, this is how much you're going to end up with cash in your jeans right now between now. Let's say they're not 65 yet. So we're going to use that 55-year-old. So from 55 to 65, this is your predictable income stream. This is what you have to live on. Okay. Then from 65 on, we know how that amount's going to change, and we know there's going to be CPP and OAS. Then we factor in, if they're getting, say, a $50,000 buyout from Chrysler, roll that into an RSP. Over time, slowly take that out. Do you have other investments? Do you have a spouse that's living at your house with you? Do you have, I've had situations where people have to pay alimony, they're maybe paying child support, factoring all these different things in to figure out, okay, how much are you going to have monthly to live? Because that's going to be your predictable income stream for the rest of your life. So we look at that. And then when we look at someone taking the commuted value of their pension, this is what we want to look at. I'm just going to turn here. I'm going to just draw a little picture on the board here. So before we use the example, so what happens is when you get this big chunk of money, the money goes into a LIRA. I don't know how if people can see that. It's a locked in retirement account. Actually, let's make this a little bit bigger. Okay, so LIRA, locked in retirement account. So let's say, for example, you have $400,000. So that's a bag of money that Chrysler says, okay, here's $400,000 that can go into a locked in retirement account. So when you get this $400,000, 50% of it, or $200,000, goes into an RSP. This RSP is all taxable. All of this money is taxable no matter what. But the key is we want to be smart and just set up an income stream and not take more than your designated amount that we have figured out for you. Everyone's situation is different. This is where people can get themselves in trouble because in theory, you could cash this all out at one time. I am not suggesting anybody do that, but just so you know how this works. The other $200,000 goes into what's called a LIF, a life income fund. Now, the key is you have to be 55 to be able to do this. So if you're watching this and you are not going to be 55 and you're considering this bag of money, then you need to talk to a retirement specialist because there's some different things. If we got into that, this would be a way too long podcast. So if you're 55 or over, then this will be applicable to you. So here you can take a 7% maximum per year. So what's the math? Glenn, 200,000 at 7% is?
Oh, forget it.
14. It's like Glenn's my marketing
Not a math guy.
Okay, that means you can take out $14,000 per year. So this money here, this $14,000 that you can take out, right? That is the maximum the government will allow you to take out. So we talked about that $3,700 a month. So, right, as somebody taking it monthly. So this $14,000, we have to then distribute that on a monthly basis to somebody. But the $14,000 is the max you can take out. Then we have to figure out how much from your RSP. Then there's a portion. So I think in the previous example, we said, okay, if there's 200,000, you can roll some into an RSP up to your RSP contribution amount. Then if there's some that you have to take as cash, if you haven't maxed out a tax-free savings, some people would put it into a tax-free. If your tax-free is maxed out, there are other investments that you can look at. So the key is really knowing the ins and the outs. But the biggest thing that I find is people don't realize the restrictions over here on the LIF, that it's subject to a 7% maximum per year. So that's where there's times where taking the lump sum doesn't make the most sense for people because they can't get the money out that's required.
I see.
To set up that income stream for themselves. So there are so many different moving parts. So if you are considering retirement in general, right? So figuring out, okay, I can appreciate if you worked at the same job, for 30 plus years, you'd like to get out of the rat race. However, sometimes you can't afford to. And if you're working a job where you're making $35 or $40 an hour, it might be better for you to stay in that job for another year or two, pay off some debt, sock away some money, and then look and say, okay, now retire and be a little bit more comfortable and get yourself set up, because it's likely going to be difficult for you to find a job making $35 or $40 an hour.
Especially in today's economy.
Well, and not just that. So think about it. So you're making, $3,700 a month. What's that a year? 40 ish, just over 40,000 a year.
Right.
Depending on your age, you're probably, and if you have any other income, you're at probably a 24% tax bracket. If you have money that you're taking to supplement, say from an RSP, you could be putting yourself in a 29% tax bracket. Well, you go get a part-time job working at Home Depot making, minimum wage or just over, then you then have to tack that income on, and now you're paying 24 or potentially 29% tax on that. Then you can create yourself a tax liability because you're not having enough tax taken off of this part-time job. So I think it's really important to say, okay, what do I need to do? And I've had people come to see me and they don't always necessarily love this, but I tell them, I don't think you can afford to retire right now.
Right.
These are the things to put in place. Or we have people simulate, like, let's do a little trial here. Because if you work for one of the big three, they don't just offer you a one-time deal and you leave. You have the option, right? Or they'll say, okay, we're going to give 100 or 150 offers, but they'll only actually approve a certain number of them anyway. So if you're in that situation, then we say, okay, now let's simulate, if you're taking home $1,200 a week, and we know that you're going to have to scale that back and you're only going to actually end up with $700 a week when you're retired. What are you doing with that extra $500? Let's pay off your debt if you have any, and let's sock away that money and make sure that you can handle it, because once you leave that job, you're going to have to figure it out.
Yeah.
So just making sure that you've laid all that out. I don't know that other financial people do that in as much detail as we do. Again, I don't enjoy telling people that I don't think they can afford to retire and it's not the best bet yet, but I don't know. I think...
But that's very responsible for you to do.
It is, and I think people can appreciate that, I've had to tell them that I don't want them to run out of money. None of us knows how long we're going to live, right? But you don't want to run out of money at age 82 and live to be 100. That's going to be a pretty sad way to live when you're just getting CPP and OAS, and you don't want to be, having to maybe move in with kids or a sibling or something like that because you can't afford your standard of living. So making sure that we cover off all of your bases is really important to us.
All right. So how do you determine how much and when someone should start drawing from the RRSPs?
That's a great question. I mean, there's so many different factors. It's going to depend on if you're getting the monthly pension, if you're eligible for the maximum CPP and OAS, what's your marital status? If you have a spouse and there's two of you contributing to the household, that's much easier than if you're, say, single or widowed or divorced and it's just your income. And then we've talked in other videos about sometimes it's not just worrying about your finances. I have one gentleman I met with a few weeks ago, and he has 3 children living at his house that are in their 30s. Doesn't sound like they're moving out anytime soon.
Wow.
And he's looking at having that definitive pension amount each month. But I said, this is probably not going to be the most popular conversation to have in your household. But your 3 grown children have jobs. They're not helping you right now contribute in any way.
Start charging rent.
Right, exactly. Like I said, not everything's all warm and fuzzy and comfortable over here, but you're making $150,000 a year, and now your pension's going to be scaled back. He's in skilled trades or one of the big 3, and his pension's going to be about $5,000 a month. The $5,000 a month is not going to go very far when you still have a mortgage on your house. You have 3 grown children in your house.
Right.
Your children have part-time custody of their children. Yeah. So you have grandkids coming to your house. And I know, my mom and my mother-in-law, they like to spoil their grandkids.
Life gets expensive very fast.
Right. So having a conversation with these kids saying, you know what, I'm going to need you each to pony up, $200 a month to help pay for groceries and increased amount of hydro and electricity.
$200 a month. Can you imagine? Like, do you know what rent costs? Like a lot.
I'm just throwing that number.
Yeah, but no, I mean that's a bargain.
Sometimes people look at me like, are you kidding me? I'm going to ask my children. It's like, well, how are you going to live your retirement? Right?
As soon as I started working, I had to pay what we called room and board at my house. It was a way to teach me about responsibility and like putting money away and having to pay for stuff that I would eventually have to pay for when I was older. So yes, when I was a kid and I started working, I was making, working at a restaurant at 15 or 16 years old, I was paying $50 a month to be at home to help out. I mean, like if you're in your 30s and if you can't afford a $200, we'll say like room and board fee for your parents, I think you need to reevaluate your life choices. Well, that's my opinion.
And pardon me for saying this, but like if you as a parent that are like in your 60s getting ready to retire even have to ask your kids, I think there's a problem. I'm really sorry if I offend people.
Yeah,
but at the same time, like, don't you think your kids should be offering? Like when I went to university and I was fortunate that I lived with my parents and I didn't have to get myself into debt. I worked, I paid for my university, but I would buy groceries. Do you think I went home and said, hey mom, I spent $200 on groceries today? Keep in mind, I mean, that would have been in like early 2000s. So grocery bills were different, but it was my mom, my stepdad, my sister and I would go to the grocery store and I buy $200 or whatever worth of groceries. I didn't go home with my hand out to my mom and expect her to reimburse me. It's like, you know what? I'm an adult, right? I'm in my 20s. I have a job. I had a full-time job and went to university. There's that thumbs up again. But I didn't ask my mom because it was like thinking my mom probably would have slapped me. Like, are you kidding me? So like, I just knew. So maybe it's a generational thing.
Yeah, I don't know. It's weird. I mean, like
we could probably do a whole other podcast just on that.
I mean, everybody has their situations, and granted, life can be tough for people.
Right.
But when you have 3 adult children over 30 that are living at home and don't offer to help supplement in any way financially, I think there's some issues there that need to be discussed.
1,000%. That's just one example. Like I could do a whole podcast on this. Happens very frequently. And so I think the key, I had a couple come in a few weeks ago and they said, I'm hoping you can meet with our son. He has a new job and I'm hoping you can convince him that he needs to save. I'm like, oh, time out. Like your son's almost 30 years old.
Yeah.
If he can't see the writing on the wall of how expensive things are, like you're fantastic parents. I hate to say this, but you've made things way too comfortable. I will have him connect with Olivia in our office.
Right.
She's younger. She's working with younger people. But if a grown-up child that is, 28, 29 years old, living at home, I call them cave dwellers. They're living in your basement. They're eating your groceries. They're using your internet. They're using your hydro. If these young people starting out with jobs making $50,000 to $60,000 a year and
not contributing at all,
contributing, then they better be putting away like $500 a week.
Yeah.
And you may disagree with me, and that's okay. Then we might not be a good fit to work together. But they really need to start saving because if you follow them around for a week and watch what they spend money on, you'd have a heart attack, right?
Wow.
They got Amazon deliveries at their house. They're at Starbucks. I see
Starbucks
these kids
daily.
I see these kids in line at Starbucks all the time and think, wow, like that is a lot of money going out of your pocket.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's about the choices that we make. So I can appreciate that, maybe it's not going to be a comfortable conversation to have with your kids about them contributing. I do have some clients where they charge their kids rent and then they put the money into an account.
I think it's great.
And then when the kids move out, there's money for a down payment on a house. There's money for appliances or couches or whatever the case may be, or there's money for your wedding or whatever. You can do it that way too. But I think the key is, why on earth would they ever leave your house if you're going to let them live there for free?
And just like the irony to me is just so sufficient. I mean, like as a parent, you spend so much time, money, and like, resources raising your kids, taking care of them. Mm-hmm. And when your kids are 30, living at home, not contributing significantly financially, and you're left to wonder about whether you're going to have enough money to retire, to me, that just doesn't make sense. Mm-hmm. It kind of throws me for a loop. So,
yeah, it is mind-boggling. So sometimes I have these uncomfortable conversations with people and say, like, I don't want to be unpopular, but, I think you need to have a conversation with them and say, I would like to retire, but I'm going to be short by X amount of dollars. If you guys are going to continue living in this house, you're going to have to help with paying. And I would hope as, young people in their 30s that are working, that they say, yeah, no problem, mom and dad, like, our bad. We probably should have been helping all along anyway, but I don't know if that's, again, I don't know if it's a generational thing or what it is. I just know
and again, we don't know the family dynamics with a lot of people, and like, sure, life can be tough sometimes, and also I think sometimes it's a cultural thing. Sometimes it's a cultural thing where parents want to take care of their kids and they actually refuse to take any sort of payment or rent or anything like that, because I've met families like that too. It's just the way it goes. I just don't find it appropriate that somebody that has worked 30-40 years their entire lives now find themselves in a situation whether they don't know whether they're going to have enough money to retire, and they have adult kids that are still living at home. I mean, like, come on.
I agree. My 7-year-old all the time, Austin's like, Mom, I'm going to live with you till I'm 30. I'm like, no, you're not. I love you. Like, the only way you are living with me until you're 30 is if you're going to school to be like a brain surgeon or something, and that requires you to be in school till you're 30. Aside from that, love you, but no.
I get it. Yeah,
we can grown up and live out
we can
on
have a
your
whole
own
discussion
and be
about this.
Yeah, it's a whole other podcast topic is
All right, let's see. Let's get back on topic here. What is required from a prospective client to bring to a first meeting so that you can help them?
Okay, great question. If you are offered a buyout, or perhaps you were offered a buyout and you didn't get selected for this round, but you're wanting to figure out for future if it makes sense or not, having that information so we can use those current numbers. Keep in mind they could obviously change, right? But knowing what those numbers are going to be in terms of that monthly pension benefit would be important versus if they're going to give you that bag of money and how we would set that up. And then having investment statements. So if you've put money into RSPs, tax-free savings, other investments in the past, then that information is all handy to have. And if you keep a budget, if you know what it costs you to run your household, that's important too, because a lot of those numbers are going to stay the same when you retire. It's the miscellaneous expenditures that are going to likely increase a little bit. So those hobbies and maybe more dinners out potentially. So those are things that, and then a tax return. So tax return, if you have a budget, your investment statements, and then the actual printout from your company saying, here's the monthly benefit we're going to pay you, or here's the commuted value of your pension. Those are the amounts that we would look, those are the items that we would require to really start working on a plan.
Nice. So you go over everybody's finances with a fine-tooth comb and really figure out what they need to do.
Absolutely.
In essence, basically to retire and make sure that they have enough money to sustain them till the end of their life. So,
yeah, and I find that a lot of people don't have an actual clear written plan. It just we're getting this monthly benefit and let's hope for the best.
Fly by the seat of your pants.
I'm a planner. Like, I like to know.
Right.
I'm very meticulous about that, and we want to get a very clear idea. And then the other thing too, so we plug all of your information into a spreadsheet that says, we're going to find out, do you have a surplus or do you have a deficit? And if you have a surplus, I've seen situations where a family's household has said, our surplus is $2,000 a month. And they look at me like, well, we don't have an extra $2,000 a month. Okay, then let's go back. It's usually in the miscellaneous expenses. It's like, okay, well, you said you spent $500 on groceries. There's two of you living in the house. $500 today is actually not a whole lot of money to spend on groceries.
Isn't that crazy?
It is. Or it's like, okay, do you only spend $200 a month eating out? Well, no, we go here, we go there. And again, it's no judgment, but we really want to look and see where is that money going.
Right.
So we want to aim where there's actually no surplus. We pretty much have you even so that you're either taking any surplus, you're paying it towards debts, or you're putting extra money into savings, right? So those are all the things that we want to figure out, because if you think you have a surplus and you have a deficit, what's going to happen when you're actually retired? You have less money coming in each month, then you're going to be in a greater deficit.
Right.
Then what happens? Then you're running up credit cards, you're running up loans and lines of credit, and you can't take those overtime shifts because you're not working anymore. So those are all the things that we want to factor in too.
Nice. Okay, so if there's one thing that you want to leave everybody with, let's say that there's a ton of auto workers listening to this right now. What's the most important takeaway that you want them to leave with for today's podcast?
I know I worked in a factory before, it's a rumor mill and, people come in to see me, oh, so-and-so I work with took the monthly benefit, so-and-so took this. What I want to take away is everyone's situation is unique. Just because your buddy that you've worked next to for 30 years, just because him taking the monthly pension is good for him, doesn't mean it's the best bet for you. Or just because he can retire right now doesn't mean you can. Maybe you still have a couple children in your house that you need to get out of there, or your circumstance might be different, right? Yeah. So I think the key is you can chat with other people that you work with, but I think you really need to look at your own specific situation and have an honest conversation with yourself. If I'm given this lump sum payment of money, am I disciplined enough to just take out what I need, or would I be better off to have that predictable monthly pension so that what I get is what I get? So these are all things to factor in, but no two conversations that I have with people are the same.
Yeah.
So I think really you've worked for 30 years or coming up on 30 years if you're considering taking a buyout. Make sure you do your due diligence, do your homework, talk to a professional. And if it's not us, that's okay. But hopefully this will give you some things to think about and ask another professional to make sure that you are retiring at the ideal time. Because again, trying to find another job making $35 or $40 an hour, there aren't a whole lot of those jobs out there right now. So,
not at all.
Does it make sense to stay for another year or so and pay off some debt or take that dream vacation that you've always wanted to go on? So I think the biggest thing is that you have your own specific, unique circumstances. Make sure you have a plan that's for you. We don't do cookie cutter here. Everyone is different. Everyone has their own plan. So I think that's what sets us apart too.
And what I really want to reiterate and kind of repeat is that whether you decide to work with Alen Godfroy here and for your plan, or whether you choose to go somewhere else, we hope that the information provided in this podcast gives you the ammunition and the questions to ask a financial professional to really set you up. Because one of the biggest things that would be hurtful to us and sad is having people retire and not have enough money to, maintain their lifestyle or run out of money before they die. That's what we don't want to see happen. So that's what we're trying to do, to educate you on having the right knowledge so that you can retire properly. So I'm Glenn Baccaro. This is Alen Godfroy, and we want to thank you for joining us here on this podcast episode, and we'll see you on the next one. Have a great day.